Well, welcome. Tonight, as you can see, we're doing the proper thing, staying safely apart, but we're going to talk about one of the biggest topics on everybody's mind, which is the state of our schools and what's going to happen. So part of it will be crystal ball, and the other part will be experience of our management team. So Kevin, why don't you start by introducing yourself?
Good evening, everybody. I'm Kevin McIntyre, the superintendent of the Milford Public Schools, and I've been on Al's show a number of times, and this is honestly the most comfortable I've ever felt because I'm in his house, I'm in my house, and he's in his house.
Well, before we get into the obvious questions, I understand we have a new assistant principal to announce.
We do. Yeah, we do. Stacy Middle School. We've got a brand new assistant principal. Her name is Jessica Torres. We're incredibly excited that she's joining us. She comes with, I believe, about 14 years of experience in the Chicopee Public Schools, where she was a Spanish teacher, and she did a number of administrative jobs. She's got a lot of great energy, a lot of enthusiasm, and I think a great knowledge of kind of teaching and learning, and she'll be a phenomenal addition to the Stacy Middle School administrative team. So we're very excited to have her join us, and she just started this past week, and she's kind of hit the ground running.
Well, I mean, the role of assistant principal, I think it's changed over the years, because for us, it was always be scared to go see Mr. Toki because he'd give you that look, and just him looking at you would frighten you.
Yeah, they're still very involved in discipline, but we see our administrators as educational and instructional leaders. So we expect them to be very well versed in curriculum, supporting teachers in the classroom, as well as kind of managing the climate and culture of the building.
So they are involved in making sure that we behave ourselves as students.
Absolutely. We still have, I don't think that's changed in any school in America in the last 40 or 50 years. We still have students engaging in some activities they shouldn't, and we have to kind of, gently move them along the right path.
Well, kids will be kids.
Absolutely.
I remember, it seems like the biggest weapon or threat that the assistant principal has gone away, which is do whatever you want to me, detention for life, whatever. Don't call my parents. I don't know if that's as big of a threat anymore as it was when we grew up.
I think it is. It's amazing how we have students who will talk a good game until, mom or dad come into the office, and I think the whole thing changes. Parents still have an incredible influence, and they're critical partners in educating children. And we still see a significant influence that they have. And, I think, don't tell mom or dad is still, I think, something that, students both at the middle school and the high school still kind of hide behind the wrong term, but there's still definitely that fear of disappointing mom or dad based on their behavior.
Well, that's good to hear, because for years, to you and to your predecessors, I've said, I believe we're paying you to educate our children, not to raise them. Because too many times I've seen the role of raising the children pushed off on the teachers in our schools.
Yeah, we still support, students in a lot of different ways, not just educationally. We're trying to, build their character, encourage them to kind of make the right decisions, and almost develop kind of a strong moral compass.
Well, I mean, it's tough too, because I think when we grew up, we might have known one single parent family. Now there's a lot. And I was amazed that, when my children were growing up, it was 3 against 2. Aaron, me, and my sainted mother, all 3 of us could almost keep up with the 2 girls.
Right. Well, it takes a village.
Yeah, well, I don't know how the parents who, you got a single mom or a single dad and a couple kids, God bless them. I don't know how they do it.
It's very challenging, and we're very respectful of the challenges some of our parents face. We also see a number of families that, the parents are working multiple different jobs to kind of, make ends meet. And that causes, I think sometimes breakdowns in communication, but, we know that they're working very hard to support their children.
Yeah, it was amazing. I mean, when I was coaching soccer, for the I won't say the typical, or not the normal, but the typical family, it gave mom or dad an hour and a half to kind of unwind while they're watching their daughters practice. You see the single parents and they bop off and immediately have to go to another child's activity or something. It was totally amazing to me that they could pull it off.
Yeah, it takes a lot of balancing, and I have a tremendous respect for, the single parents in our community who are able to kind of balance kind of, supporting and raising their child, their children, and, managing their home and managing, their job or career. It's quite a balancing act.
And now on the end of this subject, now we get to the point where we're having the discussions with our daughters about, those are my grandkids. I told them for 30 years so I could get them. Go away. Give me grandkids.
Yeah, it's funny. I was talking to Lexi the other day, and I was saying, once you have that first, child and your first grandchild, you become irrelevant. And sometimes that's a good thing. And sometimes you're like, hey, wait a second. Used to be my, mom or dad, and now you're just, Grammy and Pop-Pop or, whatever name you go by.
But it was amazing because I'll never forget the first time she let us babysit my grandson. She had to teach us how to change a diaper. And I sat there and I said, Lex, thank God you taught me, because when you were born, we only bought one diaper and we kept it on you for 3 years. I never changed it. It's just amazing.
It is incredible, the respect you had and the respect you lose when, you change that role.
But there is the ultimate where we keep having this discussion about the negative side of carbo loading children before bedtime. I have said many times to her, I see no downside. My grandson loves French fries and vanilla ice cream. So we go to Dairy Queen, get a trough of ice cream. Now we can't do it, but before this COVID thing, a bunch of French fries, let him eat them. And now as the carbohydrate tighter builds, she's a mile away. I get to drop him off. And by the time it hits him, I'm already home.
It's a beautiful thing when you can wind them up and just walk away.
Oh, yeah. So now the biggest question, I think, on everybody's mind, how are we going to open schools? I know there's 3 alternatives, but I'm not asking you to tip your hand and tell us which one you're leaning to, but what are the alternatives that you're looking at?
Yeah, so the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education has asked every district in Massachusetts, including Milford, to provide plans for in-person learning with modifications, hybrid learning, which is a combination of in-person and remote learning, and a remote learning program. And I think it's a pretty wise decision by the state, because although currently Massachusetts and most of the Northeast and New England is in pretty good shape related to the pandemic, you look around the country in places like Florida, California, the South and the West, and the numbers are very, very discouraging, both in number of cases as well as, rising hospitalizations and deaths. So those trends are not great. And they were the trends that we were seeing in the Northeast early on in the spring. So we need to be prepared. And I think we are prepared as a school system to provide, in-person or remote learning. The other thing we're doing for families is we're providing kind of a full year remote option. So if a student or a family member has an underlying condition or there's a concern about returning back to school, we're going to provide an option where families can kind of engage fully online for the year for a variety of reasons. And we recently did a survey of families, an initial survey, to get a sense of their preferences so we could kind of begin our planning process. And around 25% of our respondents opted for the remote option. My sense is that number is going to decrease a little bit, but we might see anywhere from 1 in 4 and 1 in 5 families picking a completely remote option.
So option number 1 is totally remote.
So no, one of the options is totally remote, and I would say if they picked it,
options. The first one is totally remote.
Correct.
Now, I guess I don't understand. You have a teaching staff that is in charge, say, 25 kids per teacher?
Typically, hopefully a little less than that, but that's the ballpark. Usually like 22 or 23.
Say 20 kids.
Yep.
So now, does the teacher have to prepare two different lesson plans?
So we're going to take two different approaches. At the elementary level, for the students who are engaging in the fully remote option, we're going to actually designate faculty members to teach those students and kind of develop ratios. So if I was like a kindergarten teacher last year, I might be a remote kindergarten teacher this year. At the secondary level, we're doing it a little bit differently. Teachers will teach, like say I'm an 8th grade English teacher. I may teach 4 in-person sessions and 1 remote section. And the students who are at home remote will switch between our teachers kind of on the Zoom platform, the remote platform that we're using. At the high school level, where we offer a significant number of courses and electives, we may not always be able to offer a remote option, or at a grade level at the middle school, there may not be enough students who select the remote option. In that case, we're going to be working with some online platforms where families will be working a little more independently with some support.
So now that makes a little more sense, because you wouldn't be asking a teacher to do 2 at once.
Well, that's a great question. But when we do the hybrid model, in a sense, what will happen is each classroom will be kind of cohorted into like a group A and a group B. And so the teacher may teach, the class live, one group live one day, while the other group is working independently another day. And so, again, I think to your point, we can't have teachers both online and in person at the same time. It just isn't, feasible.
Now, if I'm choosing to do a stay at home, let's just stay on option number 1. Not that it's the first option, but it's one.
Yeah.
How do I work?
So we're providing Chromebooks to every student in the district. In the past, we had Chromebooks from grade 3 to 12. This year, we'll have them from kindergarten to grade 12. And for the younger students, once they receive the Chromebooks, we don't want kindergartners bringing Chromebooks back and forth. So the Chromebooks will stay home with the family, and we'll provide some support and training both for the parents and for the students in terms of how to get on Zoom, how to get on some of the other platforms we use, and how to use the technology. And kids are pretty good about kind of accessing the technology, but they do need a fair amount of support initially, because it's just different from a video game or from some of the apps that they use.
I've got a 7 and 8, a 10-year-old. I can't leave them home all day and say, "Here's your lesson plan, follow it." If I have to work for a living, because many of us do, they can't just
correct
salary. If I have to work for a living, then how do I stay home? I mean, I don't know how these parents are going to pull this off.
Yes. So this is the really tricky part. And one of the things we're doing is we're trying to organize some folks in the community that have either space or experience in providing childcare. And I know we're going to try to look to Len Morcone and Community Use to provide some support. We're going to bring some of the other groups together, I think, in the next week to try to figure out, based on the different models that we're putting out there, how can we support families? The other thing we're going to ask families to do is maybe work with kind of a bubble of students and maybe share some of those responsibilities. Could be another way to do it. None of this, since we kind of closed down in March, none of this has been ideal. But we're trying to focus on health and safety as the driver for what we're doing, and then kind of making decisions, to keep as much academic integrity in any program or in any model as we possibly can.
Well, it seems like we don't want to say it, but you're the man in the middle of a seesaw of quality of education and safety of kids, and you got to try and balance both.
And unfortunately, whichever kind of model we come out with, it's going to not meet the needs of some portion of the population. We have, I'd say everybody's on some type of a spectrum where, people are, some families are very nervous to, send their students back to school based on kind of what's happening nationally. Other students, other families wanted them back in, April, and, for a variety of reasons. And, a lot of people kind of fall somewhere in the middle. So we're trying to take a very thoughtful approach in terms of, how we look at reopening the buildings. We're working hand in hand. And I know, Dr. Jackie Murphy with the Board of Health. She's been a fantastic support. I'm usually on the phone with her half a dozen times a week, or meeting with her and looking at, whether it's a classroom setup or how we're approaching, lunch during the day to arrival and dismissal. We're working with a number of groups. We also have 2 consulting groups that we received through a grant that are providing us support around some of our logistics and some of our, how we're constructing some of our remote learning opportunities for students.
I've seen on TV that, and I don't know how real it is, but parents are considering kind of chipping in and hiring a education person. So they would bring, 4 or 5 kids to each parent's house and rotate it.
Yep.
That they could go to work and not totally lose their employment.
Yeah, I think this is forcing all of us to kind of think about how we approach our lives in very different ways. And there's been a lot of articles. During the pandemic, you either have a choice of having a job or a child, and we're hoping that we can kind of find some middle ground there for families. I think the other tricky thing this year is we could move from one model to the other based on, like, if the numbers of COVID cases, whether it's locally in Milford or the state, kick up, we could all be back in remote learning, even if we try to do some form of in-person learning initially.
So, the biggest challenge we see then is the implementation of remote learning. Do we have enough Chromebooks?
We do. We're still waiting for the K-2 Chromebooks, but we're anticipating they'll arrive prior to the start of school. So we're pretty optimistic because we have good relationships with vendors, and unlike a number of districts across the Commonwealth of the country, we've had Chromebooks for several years now. So we're kind of connected to that world.
We funded like 600 of them, but I didn't think that we ever did get funding for the K-2 ones yet.
No, we're funding the K-2 through a one-time grant. So there's a number of, so there's federal grants and there's some state grant money to ensure, devices for children, because they realize that it's a fluid situation and we could be moving from, some form of in-person learning to remote learning. The other thing we're doing this year, which was a barrier for a number of our families, is providing Wi-Fi access at home. And again, through one-time grants. So it cuts down that barrier of a device, and it also cuts down the barrier of getting access to the internet, which are both critical for successful remote learning.
So is this something that Comcast and Verizon are providing?
Yeah, we're actually in the process of kind of determining which cable company we're probably going to go with and they provide kind of a low-cost internet access option that we can provide for families, so that the children in the home can access the internet, get on Zoom, interact with their teachers, that sort of thing. And I think we're into, and I don't have the number exactly, so I don't want to misquote it, but it's in the vicinity of 400 families that we've kind of targeted initially that didn't have access last year, that we'd like to kind of close that loop on.
Well, that's fantastic, because I know years ago, Sue Edmonds from the public library came to the FinCom and asked for funding.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, came to town meeting. It's not the FinCom that has any money, but to expand the wireless, the bandwidth, because so many kids did not have wireless at home. And I think a lot of us take it for granted that you have electricity, you have water, you have wireless.
Right. And we do. And the library has been a critical partner for us over the years, because it's amazing that, after school, kids head in a number of different directions. Some kids go home, some kids go to the library, some kids go to the youth center, some kids go, to practices or, band practice or whatever. But the library and the youth center have been critical in terms of they provide that Wi-Fi so kids can get their homework done. And now that, access for a lot of places is limited, we need to open that up in the homes, at least for this coming year, because of what's happening, around the nation and around the world.
400 families will now have wireless that didn't. That's great, Kevin.
Yeah, and it's something we had to do just based on our experience in the spring. Because when this happened in the spring, we were just like, I think every other community in the country. I think we were more prepared in the sense that we had a lot of Chromebooks from grades 3 through 12, but we didn't have access in the home. And let's say about 10% of our homes, and we had to produce a lot of packets and a lot of work using paper, because we had to provide kind of like parallel programs. And this year we're not going to be able to do that. We're not going to have to do that, because everyone will have access in the device.
So now option 2, I totally can't get my arms around, which is go back to normal.
So yes,
We're going to be normal, but then I heard we're going to stay 6 feet apart. And I said, well, where are you building the new schools? Because, St. Mary's Church, which is huge. The minute we did the 6-foot gig, we could fit 50 people.
right.
So how is it even possible? Now, I heard they went to 3 feet, which in my opinion, the desks touch each other. How would that even be possible, Kevin?
Yeah, so we've mocked up classrooms both at 3 feet and 6 feet. And at 3 feet, most of our classrooms, we can fit around 24 desks and chairs in there. At 6 feet, it drops to, anywhere from 9 to 12, depending on the size of the classroom. So basically, if we go all in, it's, 3 feet apart, everybody's wearing masks, we're, following hand hygiene. And, the school day is just going to look a lot different because, and this is whether we're 3 feet or 6 feet, because we're cohorting students in groups. All the seats are going to be assigned, whether it's the classroom, on the bus, or in the cafeteria. And, just movement around the building is going to be organized in ways that it hasn't been in the past. So, we're going to have procedures about going to the bathroom, coming into the building, leaving the building. During the day, we're going to have to schedule mask breaks within the course of a class period because, kids need a little bit of a break and some fresh air. So, think of it like a very scheduled fire drill where we'll have different, each exit in the building kind of targeting a different group of students. And those students on kind of a schedule will go out and take a couple-minute break where they can take their mask off, stretch their legs, and then they'll go back into class. So it's unfortunately going to look, a lot different than it has. And, we can talk athletics, we can talk music program, which are also going to be impacted. And we're still waiting for, what both of those are going to look like over the course of the year.
Now, what would be more of a challenge? Trying to get my 5 and 6-year-old grandson to sit still and stay 3 feet apart, or looking at the teenagers who, let's face it, when we were in high school, I knew I was immortal. Nothing could stop me. And if I had a chance to hold Sally's hand, I don't know that I would worry about the virus. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think they present equal challenges, but very different challenges. Physically distancing, preschoolers or kindergartners who have no sense of like space or self or others is challenging. And then kind of your point about, the hand holding. And I think, middle school and high school kids are very, very social creatures that want to interact with each other in a lot of different ways. So it's going to be a challenge, and it's going to be, I think, a challenge for everybody to kind of make it work. And we're almost looking at the whole thing like a social contract, where the more we can get our students and our faculty and our community members to kind of, follow, the mask wearing, the hand hygiene, and the physical distancing, the quicker we can kind of be back at, in Foxborough to watch a Patriots game, or, in Boston, or, have a basketball game at Milford High School, those kinds of things, or a band concert at Milford High School or Milford, Stacy Middle School. Those are the things we want to see back. And it's going to be a weird kind of year for schools because we're going to have to change some of the kind of rituals that we expect to happen on a regular basis, where, we have a schedule of concerts, we have sports seasons, we have, different dances and events that either we may have to modify in, pretty fundamental ways, or we may not be able to hold it all, which is very unfortunate.
It's got to be tough because, as I think about everything we did in high school, it was easy to listen to you shouldn't do this and you shouldn't do that. But then at the end of the day, I'd never 100% complied with all the rules. And what I worry about is the domino effect. If one child in one class gets the virus, now you got 24 kids who could potentially get it. The teacher goes home. She has children in Woodland as well as Stacy, and that domino, I don't know how you control it.
Yeah, and I think we're trying to mitigate risk more than anything else, and try to manage it as much as possible. The Department of Education just released about, I think it's somewhere between 18 and 20 pages of kind of protocols and processes. If there's a teacher who's positive, or there's a student who's positive, and kind of how it almost follows kind of the principles of contact tracing, where we have to kind of look at it back. But you can see where, you know, any live school is going to be kind of a delicate balance, and could break down at any moment if we have, a number of cases pop back up in Milford. And at one time we had, a number of cases in town. Now we're doing very, very well. So I'm hoping that continues. But you're
now
absolutely
we're staying away from each other.
right.
I mean, in all candor, you sit there and say, okay, one child in one classroom in Woodland gets the virus.
Mm-hmm.
That's immediately 50 that have to be quarantined if we're lucky.
Correct.
Right?
And again, you can see where it kind of multiplies out.
Yeah, you get 10 kids across the district, and they're taking out, you assume the teacher's other child, that family. Now that teacher has I don't understand how the masks make sense because I'm protecting you from me when I wear a mask.
Correct.
I'm not protecting myself from you.
Right.
And I know a lot of people get confused, but after working in cell culture long enough, that mask protected what was out there from me.
Right.
So if one kid, and God bless them, they're kids, one kid doesn't wear a mask, you could start the dominoes.
Correct. And that's the real challenge of all of this, because we do want, kids back in school. We want, kind of a return to at least close to normal. And I don't even know if, live school is going to be what, our students will remember when they come back. It'll be very different in a lot of ways. We're trying to still capture, some of the joy and some of the excitement, but also kind of put in, safety protocols, safety procedures that support, kind of live school continuing, and hopefully, we get to a point where, more and more students will be able to come back together and do some of the things that, they love to do.
I remember as kids when we had to put classrooms in the youth center, and you had the, not too far back, what do they call them? The portables at Woodland.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was just a few years ago.
Portables at Memorial. And what I kept learning as I watched was the kids are a lot more flexible than the adults.
Correct.
Somehow the kids, it was like water. You put an obstacle in front of them, they somehow float around it and continued. The parents hit the rocks.
No, that's definitely true. And I think in certain areas, we're all kind of set in our ways and like things the way we like them, where I think students are a lot more resilient and surprise us in a lot of ways, where they're able to kind of, manage things that we find to be very difficult.
So you do feel the biggest concern I had was that you could fit the kids, because I thought 3 feet, that means their desks are touching except for maybe an inch apart.
Yeah, so I don't know if 3 feet is going to be viable based on feedback we're getting from the community, but those are the two different scenarios that the Department of Education has kind of asked us to kind of run through. Is do we run do we run a program where we can bring most of the students back most of the time at 3 feet of distance? Do we run a hybrid program where we bring about half the kids back at 6 feet of distance? And there's other considerations like, the challenges around, although we can fit students in most classrooms, feeding students for lunch is going to be very challenging because they can't be at 3 feet of distance because you have to take your mask off to eat. So, and you've been in all the schools in the district and like the tables, the math just doesn't work around putting, students at, where 12 students went. If we put 3 students, that means we'd have to start lunch at probably 5 in the morning and finish up at 6 in the afternoon, which I don't think follows anybody's schedule.
But
so that's a challenge.
Lunch was the social epicenter, to sit at the table with your friends and catch up on whatever. I don't know how you take that away.
So, we're looking at a number of different models. One thing we may have to do is put individual desks in the cafeteria, and kids will still be able to kind of interact with the people directly around them. But, and lunch hasn't changed a whole lot. You have kids sitting at tables. And at the elementary level, I think it's a little more structured. But at the high school level, you have, social butterflies moving from table to table. We have students eating outside when it's nice. We have students kind of socializing in the hallway in front of the auditorium. So it's not going to look that way, unfortunately. But I think students we're still going to be able to talk to each other, but it's going to be, unfortunately, a lot more managed and structured, which again, your point about, the high school kids, wanting to hold hands and kind of get connected in those ways. And the elementary kids, just kind of figuring out who they are. It's going to be a challenge for students to manage themselves. And we can't expect perfection from any one student or all the students, but we've got to just kind of keep working with everybody to kind of make sure that we're all kind of doing things that keep everybody safe.
The only thing I'm absolutely confident of, Carla will serve tremendously good food.
That is 100% true. And she's been
any obstacle in front of an Oliva, and good food somehow comes out.
And I got to tell you, I'll tell anybody who will listen to me that we have the best, food service anywhere in the country, and it's amazing the work that she does. And another thing I'd love to highlight is we've been serving lunches basically from the day we've closed through today. So we're putting, over the closure, we were serving about 7,000 meals a week, sometimes as high as 8,000 or 9,000 meals, and in the summertime, we're serving around 4,000 to 5,000 meals a week.
Now, that's something that I don't think people, at least most people, appreciate, because candidly, I don't want to believe it happens in my town, that there are kids who are hungry and their best meal or most substantive meal is what they get for free breakfast and lunch at the school. Why don't you tell us what happened when all of a sudden the schools were closed?
Yeah, so we ended up closing 2 days ahead of everybody else, just because we had just a circumstance with a faculty member where there was some exposure. So when schools across the state all closed initially, we were already serving food that Monday at Memorial Elementary School. So we were providing breakfast and lunch, and it's such a great operation. We've been doing it in the summer, so it was very easy for us to ramp it up. And we actually, supported a couple surrounding communities initially, so families could come to Milford and get meals for their children. So, I give a great deal of credit to Carla and her team. She's like you said, she's a gamer on the worst of days, and on the best of days, there's no stopping her.
But you're talking 500 meals a day, right?
Pretty close to 1,000, actually.
Holy moly!
Yeah, so we basically set up like a little quick drive up service where families would get out, grab the lunch or the breakfast, or walk up and grab the lunch or the breakfast, and head out. And we had you think 1,000 meals, we probably had 600 or 700, or 500 to 700 different families coming up, depending on the number of children that they had. I also want to give credit to the YMCA, who's been a great partner in this, as well as the Milford Area Humanitarian Coalition, who've been phenomenal since we started this program several years ago, and it's been a huge success. And every weekday throughout the summer, we provided meals, and Carla and her team have done an exceptional job.
So 5 days a week you feed the kids. What happens on the other 2?
So what we've done and what we've been able to do is we've collected donations from a variety of sources, and it's mostly been from the Milford community, which is incredibly generous. And families are able to bring groceries home on weekends. Oh. So they might pick up a bag of groceries or a box of vegetables or some combination thereof. So there's food over the weekend. And what we've seen is during the pandemic, food insecurity across the state of Massachusetts was somewhere around 10% of families. It jumped up to somewhere around 30% of families because of job losses and other circumstances. And so we're thrilled to be able to kind of make a little bit of a dent in that issue.
That's like 2,500 homes in Milford.
Yeah.
I mean, we got 8,000 houses. Oh my God.
Yeah. So Yeah, so it's a pretty significant number, and I know there's a number of other organizations in the community that are providing. A number of our churches and other community organizations are also providing meals on different nights or providing grab and go services, and it really takes everybody kind of pitching in, and we're happy to support that. And the other important point is whether we have school on a given day or we don't have school on a given day, we're going to feed all the students that are in the buildings, but we're also going to provide that same service.
I mean, that's a great point. The kids still have to eat whether they're going to school or not.
Right. And when we're going to be prepared to do lunches, whether we're fully remote or we're in a hybrid model, or there's students that are choosing to do the remote model, we're going to provide lunches to everybody who needs it, to be honest with you.
So people drive up, it's like a strafing run. I mean, that many cars, you must have X seconds to take the doggy bag, hand it to them, and say, go.
It's actually worked pretty well. So it's basically, we set up a couple of tables under the awning at Memorial Elementary School. Families drive up. If they have 3 students, they'll grab like three lunches or breakfasts, and then they'll just pop right off. And people have done a great job of kind of maintaining physical distance and being kind of respectful of space and that sort of thing, which has been my experience kind of almost across the board with the pandemic. You hear a lot of crazy stories across, on the national news or across the country, but I've seen a tremendous amount of patience in Milford, and I've seen a tremendous, kind of community spirit.
Well, the one thing that you can argue many things and have many positions, but I dare anybody to argue that Milford Town Meeting and its residents haven't always taken care of our kids.
And I would agree with that 100%.
So this continues until school starts, this strafing run project?
Yes. So we're providing, again, meals every weekday, and then support for families over the weekend with some groceries and some non-perishable food and some vegetables. And then we'll continue the program throughout the year, because at any point we're going to have a certain percentage of students. There'll be some points in the year where we're going to be fully remote, and we'll be feeding all the students at Memorial who want to grab a lunch. There'll be other times where there'll be a portion of students we'll be serving there, and then the other portion will be serving in our schools.
Now, if any of the 6 people who watch our show want to donate, because it's a great cause, how do I donate to help out the kids in Milford?
So I think there's two ways to kind of provide a donation. Actually, 3 ways. One is we run a number of food drives on Sunday mornings, and we post that on kind of social media, Facebook, Twitter, and we send out some emails to the community. They can also either donate to the YMCA and designate the donation for the Milford feeding program, or you can donate to the Milford Area Humanitarian Coalition, and it all goes to the same place.
But I don't know who they are. If I just want to send a check, how would I find, I know where the high school is.
Correct. So that's where people are dropping off direct kind of food donations. I would say go to the Hockomock Area YMCA website, and there's a drop-down menu where they can make a donation and designate the Milford Feeding Program. The Milford Humanitarian Coalition, I'm not as certain about in terms of the direct way to give a donation. But if someone were to drop a check off to either the Hockomock YMCA or the Milford Area Humanitarian Coalition to the high school, we can get those resources to Carla and her team through those 2 organizations.
Okay, because I know the school system's been great. My class of 74 always sponsored a scholarship donation every year. Yep. We didn't have any kids this year, so the officers decided they should write a check to the Best Buddies. Of course, I had no idea, how do you write a check to the Best Buddies?
Right. So
I called somebody I knew, and they said, don't worry, you give us the money, we'll find a way of accepting it.
Yeah, and we will receive donations for, we'll see, the Family and Community Network will receive donations for, and we get that directly to them. We'll also see it for groups like the Best Buddies or Special Olympics, and we're able to kind of, get the money directly to those organizations too, which do fantastic work for, the students and young adults in Milford.
Yeah, the least worry I'll have is if Kathy gets her hands on money that she can't find a way of getting it to kids.
Exactly. She's fantastic at that. There's no question about it.
Okay, so now option number 3. Help me understand this hybrid thing.
So,
A lot of work for the teachers and confusion of understanding.
yeah. So the best way I would conceptualize a hybrid model is to say that what we're going to do, because we have to do it, is cohorting all the students in the district into two different groups, an A group and a B group. And we're doing that first by their home address. So if you have 3 kids, we're not putting them into 2 different kind of programs or schedules. All the kids in a household, all the children in a household will follow the same schedule unless somebody makes a specific request that has a valid reason behind it. Once we do that, we're basically setting up classes. We're basically splitting classes in half is the best way to conceptualize it. And one model that we're looking at is a model where students are with their teacher for 2 days a week in a live classroom. Everybody is remote for a day, and there's 2 days of independent remote learning. And what this does is it gets the kids consistent contact 3 days a week with their teachers. And I like it better, and I think we like it better than like a week on and a week off, because a week off is every time a kid comes back, it's like
a long
Christmas. Yeah, it's like Christmas vacation or Easter vacation, and you're starting everything from scratch. So this would give, and if you do that, they get 5 days of contact out of 10 days. This would give 6 days of contact out of 10 days. The other thing I like about it is it's predictable in terms of the days of the week that the kids would be in school, fully remote, or working on the independent remote program.
So in this program, parents would have to figure out 3 days a week.
3 days a week, yes.
Of having the children at home.
Right.
They could work 2 days a week.
Correct. So again, we're looking at community options for childcare, and we're also encouraging families to work together to kind of support each other, because it'd be great if you could get 3 or 4 families together. So instead of having to do 3 days a week, you're maybe doing 1 day every 2 weeks or 1 day every 3 weeks, and trying to make that work. And I know families in the community have different schedules. So if you work the 9 to 5 or 8 to 4 job, and somebody else works maybe the second shift or the night shift, there might be some opportunity there to say, hey, I'll keep the kids for dinner and get them to bed, but you work with them during the remote learning during the day, or vice versa, those kinds of things.
Well, from a parental point of view, I could probably squeeze and chip in, if we were cutting the cost of if I want to call it a remote teacher.
Yeah.
By 5. Right. I don't know that the average Milfordian could hire an independent tutor all on their own.
Yeah, and that might be another way to look at it, is if you find one babysitter or one childcare provider, and split it 4 or 5 ways, that becomes maybe more lucrative for the individual who's doing the childcare, the remote tutor or teacher, and and it could work out for the families also. So I think there's a potential for a win-win there, and we have a number of college students who are probably doing college remotely. And this could be a good opportunity for them to kind of make a little extra money, and support some of our families in town as well. So we're hopefully in the next week or so, we're going to try to figure out some ways to kind of support our families, because I know it's very daunting as a working parent, and it's probably daunting all the way up through kids in middle school. I think in high school, you're a little nervous about leaving your high school students alone for the day for different reasons. But there's some real childcare concerns at the early elementary level through probably middle school, in terms of having someone there who can say, hey, are you doing your assignments? Making sure they get breakfast and lunch, and get to wherever they need to get to during the day. So I'm super sensitive to those issues. And hopefully we can support families in trying to find some viable solutions, because I know, with the economy, a lot of families are struggling. We also know that, childcare is very expensive in the best of times.
Yeah, I remember we took everything for granted because, my darling bride had my sainted mother living with us for 30 years. So when the kids came home at 2:30, 3 o'clock, whatever time it was, Grandma was down there at the bus stop, bringing them up and cooking them, late lunch or early dinner, whatever you want to call it. So we were blessed from that end, but a lot of people don't have that.
Correct. And some people don't have that, extended family network where they can get, that support from, an aunt or a cousin or anything like that. So that's why we're trying to, see what we can do. And I think it's unlikely that we're going to find viable childcare solutions for a huge percentage of families in Milford, but if we can chip away at it a little bit and provide some ideas or some support there, I'm hopeful between community use and some of our other partners in the community, we'll be able to support some families, and there's going to be some opportunities throughout the year to do some creative programming where we may be able to provide additional support for some families also.
Now I'm going to ask you a question that if you have to plead the fifth, I won't take it wrong, but I mean, we've been blessed, at least my opinion, with the unions we've had compared to other towns. When Milford was training, our teachers union didn't eat their young. They actually, all came together to help us. Are we asking too much of them with this hybrid program?
I think I've been talking a lot with, our union leadership over the last several weeks, and I think we have more areas of agreement than disagreement at this point, which is not unusual. I think they're taking a very reasonable approach. I've been kind of saying that, flexibility, patience, and understanding have to be our watchwords throughout this process. And, I can't tell everybody else to be flexible, but be inflexible myself. It'd just be completely hypocritical. So we have to really, I think we're working at it from a partnership perspective. I think they understand, what our limitations are in terms of what we can provide. But, I think I'm pretty confident that wherever we land, we're going to be able to come up with an agreement that's going to work, not just for the faculty and the administration, but hopefully for families. And our end game here for all of this is to get everybody back in the building. We just need to do it in a way that's safe and responsible. And
back to education and safety. How do you balance?
And those are the tricky conversations. And we're in, I think, a different space than a lot of places in the country where we can consider even bringing kids back, even some kids back to the building. I'm pretty certain that most districts are going to land somewhere in a hybrid model, which is, again, there's no ideal solution right now, but, with a hope that hopefully over time, we'll be able to bring, more students back in.
Now, the real question, when will you tell us?
So I'm going to be sharing information with families as early as tomorrow in terms of what the broad models are, what we're hoping to accomplish. The big asterisk next to anything we're doing this year is if the public health data changes, it completely shifts what we're able to do.
When are you going to say we're going to option 1, 2, or 3 to start? Because we all know that whatever option you pick is wrong and is
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
From your perspective, it's either going to be the greatest solution you could think of or the worst. But when would you pick one?
So we're presenting something to families tomorrow, and like kind of a broad outline to families and providing more detail the following week. So families will know before the July 31st deadline the direction we're leaning, but knowing that, and this is the tough thing, there's you don't want uncertainty with children, and we're living in uncertain times, and it's just going to be, whenever I make a decision, whether it's related to like a snow day or when we had to close schools a couple of days before the state did, I'm looking at the data on the ground. I'm, communicating with, the Board of Health and other kind of,
like I say, Kevin,
officials.
You're going to be wrong and right no matter which option you pick.
Well, whenever I call a snow day, I'm an idiot and a genius on the same day.
Right. And, in this case, at least the snow, it happens.
Right.
This one, you could be down, option 5, and a month or two later, the tide changes on the pandemic and you got to rethink.
And that's what we're going to have to be. We're going to have to flexibly move between models. I think the way we're going to look at schools is very similar to how the state of Massachusetts has approached, just the reopening process where, we've moved forward, and then sometimes we've had to take a step back based on things changing, circumstances changing. Now, the challenge with COVID that, I think everybody's painfully aware of now is the symptoms are very similar to the common cold, the flu, a number of other viruses. So whenever anybody presents these symptoms, I think some people are going to the worst case scenario, but we've got to kind of follow a process and see where it leads.
Well, for months, if I dare walk towards the door, I had my daughters and darling bride, just blocking it, saying, "You're not moving out of this house."
Right.
Bless them. I mean, I'm happy that they care about me, but it's like, I did want to get out of the house once.
And that's the other aspect of this is I think people are trying to do the best that they can with the physical distancing and the social distancing. But, just like kids, we're all social creatures and we want to kind of engage in the world in similar ways that we did pre-pandemic. And I still don't think we're there yet, but, hopefully we're moving in that direction.
Now, before COVID came into the picture, the school committee was talking about, and I was the one that kept rubbing it in your face, that you added one child per year.
Right.
From 222 in 1974 until a few years ago, we had 260. That was one kid per year.
Yeah.
Then you started talking about what, 300-400 more?
Yeah. Over the last few years, we've basically added the equivalent of an additional elementary school to the public schools. Yeah. Yeah. So
you didn't get a new building. And from what I understand, unless you had money that we don't know about, you didn't hire the 20 teachers you said you needed. So what happened?
So right now, it's going to be difficult to say what the impact of the pandemic is going to be on our numbers for the district. I'm hoping it stays flat, because if it stays relatively flat, we can manage it. We've got a few
teachers.
Well, we've got a few circumstances that are going to be a little far from ideal, and some class sizes that are going to be bigger than we're comfortable with. But again, it's if we had another 300 students, we're going to have significant problems. I don't anticipate that, because I think the community to community movement has just decreased. And in terms of new enrollments, we would typically have, a couple of hundred new kids coming in and a bunch of new kids going out. And I don't think we're going to see that level of movement, just because I think there's anxiety for everybody that, they're kind of comfortable where they are. And we're just not seeing the movements just as a society right now. So I'm hoping that we don't see the jumps we've had the last couple of years, because that will cause a number of problems in a number of areas. Because if we're talking like classes of 24 that suddenly become 27, we may not even be able to fit a classroom in a hybrid model, in a space. So that's my one worry. And I've been wrong on this so many times that I hate to even make any kind of prediction, but I'm anticipating less movement in and out this year than we've had over the last 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, somehow you always are like the weatherman. We count whether it's going to rain, but the decisions are a lot more critical.
Yeah, 100%. And it's been pouring the last few years with the number of new students we've had. So now, it's been interesting.
Something a little nicer. I hear we're having a graduation.
We are, and we're really excited about that. The weekend of August 9th, we're hoping to have the graduation either Saturday or Sunday, and we're going to base the time and the day on the weather forecast to kind of get back to weather. So we're going to ask people to be flexible, but the goal is to have it outside. We've got a couple of new features this year that I think the kids are going to be excited about. It's going to be a little different, because we're not going to have people on top of each other kind of cheering on the graduates. We usually get a very big crowd for graduation, and unfortunately, each graduate can bring, I believe, 2 guests, and it's probably going to be mom and dad, or a couple of important people in their life.
Yeah, but that's happened before, when it rained on graduation and we had to move into the gymnasium. We had to tell Auntie and Grandma, I'm sorry that you came all the way, but you can watch it on Channel 8.
Yeah, so we've got a kind of a secondary plan if the weather goes south that we're hoping we don't have to install. So think the Mendon Upton Drive-In is a model of how we'd run graduation if we have torrential downpours over the weekend. But I think they've got a good plan in place. We're excited to celebrate the students.
Mendon? Is that
No. We're not going. We're not going to Mendon, but we may have one of the features of the Mendon Drive-In as part of our graduation ceremony.
I was
I
gonna-
think we're gonna bring in a big screen or two to kind of make it work in a number of different circumstances.
well, that'll be cool.
Yeah, so it'll be a little bit of a different kind of feel to it. But we're super excited because, for you and IL, this is like the pandemic is like it changes how we live life day to day. But we're not high school seniors who only experienced being a high school senior once. We're not, second graders who kind of miss out on, the different things that second graders do, or the eighth graders who miss the DC field trip. It's those kind of things that we're trying to do as much as we can to make, to celebrate some of these events in different ways. Like we had the big car parade in June for graduation, which actually was phenomenal. It was great to see the kids and, everybody out in the cars and everybody cheering them on the side, the sides of the streets. It was great. But I'm excited about graduation. We're doing the Dick Corbin Awards this weekend for our student athletes at the high school, which will be a good kind of with a little bit of a smaller group and a good dry run for graduation.
So now tell us about the Dick Corbin. I mean, obviously, if it's Dick Corbin, it has something to do with athletics.
Yeah, so this is an event that typically happens during senior week where we honor our athletes and our coaches and our teams and, kind of celebrate our seniors who are going off into the world, whether they're going to continue their athletic careers or not. It's a great event. It's a very positive event, and it's an event that really celebrates our students, our student athletes, and our coaches who support those students. And it's run by our booster club, and they do a phenomenal job. And we're excited that we're able to pull off a modified version this weekend. And I think there's a tremendous amount of enthusiasm from the students to just kind of experience this kind of, this one aspect of the rite of passage during senior week.
Well, a lot of those kids have worked very hard at being athletes. And, Pete Boucher amazes me because I love his attitude. That they are student athletes.
Yeah.
First of all, they're students, then they're athletes. So I love that, and how he has them understand that they're representing the town of Milford when they put on a Hawk uniform of any shape, size. I hate to take away from them,
Yeah, and it was heartbreaking to lose, especially our seniors who lost the spring season, and some of our athletes who were in the playoffs that kind of some of the playoffs stopped when we were still engaging with them. And to be able to do something to recognize their hard work and achievements is fantastic. And I'm excited we're able to do that program as well as the graduation.
Well, as we come to the end, hats off to, as always, the Milford teachers, because somehow I don't read about the conflict in Milford that I read, that you see in other towns.
And they've been awesome, Al. I've got to tell you, they've been awesome. They've been flexible. They've been saying, "How can we help?" It's been phenomenal.
And to our 6 loyal viewers that are socially distanced, may God bless. Good night, and may tomorrow be a better day than today. Thank you.
Not too long since I've been home.